Hi guys, Olive here. Here today to tell you about my reading plans for June 2022. It has been a wonderful, relaxing 2 months of not posting that much here on my channel. Just in case you didn't notice, I was taking it a little bit easy in April and May, but June is about to be here, which means that I am ready to get back to my normal posting schedule. It's been weird not posting as much, and I have lots of good content planned for the rest of the year, so I'm ready to get started. But the first order of business is to talk about all the books that I plan to read in June. As usual, let's start off this TBR video by discussing all of the fiction books that I intend to read in June, and then in the second half of the video, we will move into talking about nonfiction. So first and foremost, the classic book that I have selected for June is going to be O Pioneers by Willa Cather. And this is the story of a young woman who takes over her family's farm in Nebraska. And from what I hear about this book, it seems to be very setting dominated. Lots of descriptions of the land, nature writing in here. And since I love nature writing, I am pretty sure I'm going to enjoy this. The next novel on my June TBR is, believe it or not, the final book in my unofficial Meg Wolitzer project that I assigned to myself. I wanted to read through all of Meg Wolitzer's backlist, or at least I wanted to read all of her adult novels. She's also written some YA and some children's novels, which I'm not choosing to count toward this project because I don't want to. So the last adult novel of hers that I have yet to read, the novel that will complete this project, is called Hidden Pictures. This is Meg Wolitzer's second novel. It came out in the mid to late 80s, and in it we follow a woman who has just very recently gotten out of her marriage when she falls in love with another woman. And this apparently causes complications with her ex-husband and her son. And apparently it discusses the meaning of family, which I will be very interested to hear what Meg Wolitzer has to say about that through this book, because she was very young when she wrote this. But I am really excited to finally read this one, and not just because I will then be done with this project. I mean, that is definitely a part of my excitement. But I'm also really curious to see what I think about this book, because it being her second novel, and I've read all of her other ones. I've read her first, I've read her third. I really liked her first, Sleepwalking, and I hated her third novel, This Is My Life. So I'm curious to see where this one will fall. I guess we'll find out. But there's another author whose backlist I definitely want to take a closer look at, and that's Heather O'Neill, because her two most recently published books, The Lonely Hearts Hotel and When We Lost Our Heads, which just came out a couple of months ago, those were both 5-star reads for me. And I feel like that's a pretty good indicator that I should go back and take a look at her backlist, because I will probably really enjoy those books. So in June, I'm going to read her debut novel, which is called Lullabies for Little Criminals. And this is all about a young girl who has a talent for telling stories. I'm not exactly expecting this to go on to earn 5 stars for me. Just because I've loved her two most recent novels doesn't guarantee that this will be a 5-star read. And I've had so many 5-star predictions go bad that I'm not going to jinx it, but I do think I'm really going to like this one, and that makes me very excited. There is one novel coming out in the month of June that I definitely want to get my hands on if I can, if my library decides to acquire it. And this one I really want to read because it comes from an author who I also really trust. The book is called Flying Solo by Linda Holmes, and I want to read this because this is by the author of Evie Drake Starts Over. And Evie Drake Starts Over was an unexpected favorite for me last year. I did not expect that book to end up on my year-end fiction favorites list. And it did, because that book just stayed with me. It has still stayed with me. I still think about that book all the time. And it was just a really light-hearted romance. It was not at all the type of book I would expect would stay with me in the way that it definitely has. So I have a lot of faith in this author, and this new one sounds fun just in its own right. It's about a woman who goes back to her hometown in Maine in order to handle her great-aunt's estate. Her great-aunt has just recently passed away. And while our main character character is handling her affairs, she discovers that her great aunt was keeping a whole lot more secrets than anyone ever knew about. That just sounds like a ton of fun, plus the fact that I trust this author. I am so excited. I'm going to devour this. And the last fiction book on this June TBR will not come as a surprise to you if you've spent a good amount of time here on this channel, especially if you've been here for at least a calendar year. Then you will have seen my previous June TBRs in previous years. But every single June, I reread my all-time favorite book, Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. And this is a reread that I look forward to basically from the moment I turn the last page in this book. At the moment I'm done reading this book, I'm looking forward to next year's reread. This is a book that brings me so much comfort and so much joy every single June. I know I mentioned this book quite a bit here on my channel. This being my favorite book, of course, it's going to come up in conversation. But what I don't think I've ever talked about before on this channel, and this is astonishing that I've never mentioned this before, it wasn't until after my first reread of this book that it became my favorite book. The first time I read this, I really liked it. I gave it 5 stars. I found it to be impressive. But it was only after I reread it that I was able to understand all the subtleties in here. I was able to recognize those, and I was able to understand this book's brilliance. It really knocked my socks off after that second read through, knowing what happens in the plot, not trying to follow that, just focusing on what all he does in this book, focusing on its wisdom. Every single time I read this book, it has new things to teach me. I get new things out of this book every single year. And I'm just in the best headspace every time I read this book. It feels like every time I read this, every single June, it's like a giant reset button for me. So I'm really looking forward to recalibrating with this book again this year. This will be my 8th reading of it, so my 7th reread. But then, like I said at the beginning of the video, there are also some nonfiction books that I would like to take on during the month of June, and the first of those is Bonk by Mary Roach. This is Mary Roach's book on the science of sex, the science of sexuality, and I put this on my TBR because I horrified myself with the concept of time very recently. I was thinking about Mary Roach. I was thinking about how it feels like just yesterday that I read and reviewed her latest book, Fuzz. And then I realized, oh wait, that was back in September of 2021, meaning we're coming up on 8 months since I read and reviewed her latest book. And since her back catalog is another one I would also very much like to get through, and apparently I'm putting 8 months in between my reading of her books, I probably will never achieve that goal unless I actually start reading more of her books and start to get a grip on the passing of time. I don't think that latter thing is going to happen, but at least I can pick up another Mary Roach book this month. Since summer is approaching here in the Northern Hemisphere, I thought that a book about sea creatures would be a good addition to this June TBR, so I plucked The Secret Life of Lobsters by Trevor Corson off of my shelves. And this is a book all about lobster biology, but also the lobstering, meaning the lobster fishing community. And from what I hear about this book, it doesn't include an element of the ethical debate about eating lobster. If you are interested in that debate, I would highly suggest you read David Foster Wallace's essay called Consider the Lobster. That goes really in depth on that issue. But I wanted to pick this one up specifically because I wanted to learn more about lobsters, the creatures. I want to learn more about their biology. I'll read everything else in this book happily, but I especially want to learn about that because very recently I've gone down this YouTube rabbit hole. I found this one video showing a man rescuing a lobster from the grocery store and keeping him as a pet. This man named that lobster Leon, and I'm absolutely obsessed. Getting to see Leon up close through these videos, getting to see his behavior, just recently got to see him molt. I'm just absolutely fascinated. I have to learn more. I will link the first video in that series up in the cards if you want to go meet Leon yourself. I am just head over heels in love with those videos. But this felt like the right pick for this month since I've been wanting to learn more about lobsters. The next nonfiction book I want to read during the month of June is The Facemaker by Lindsay Fitzharris. This one comes out at the beginning of June. If my library decides to acquire it, really hoping that they do, then I will definitely be reading this one. This is a history. It's the story of this pioneering plastic surgeon who did reconstructive surgery on men who fought in World War I. I loved this author's previous book on Joseph Lister. It was called The Butchering Art. I love her whole goth scientist vibe, and I'm pretty positive I'm going to love her new book. And then to round out this TBR, I have a pair of nonfiction books. There's one backlist, one front list, but they're both from the same author, Patrick Radden Keefe. In June, I'm hoping to read both Say Nothing and Rogues. Say Nothing looks at the 1972 disappearance of a mother of 10 and the connection of that disappearance to the IRA. So it's a family story, but it's also connected to the time and the place, the history of that region, which is also detailed in the book. And then Rogues, his newest book, which comes out at the end of June, is a collection of 12 pieces that Patrick Radden Keefe wrote for The New Yorker. And they're all true crime exposés, which is very much his bailiwick. A very long time ago, I promised Jill from the Book Bully that I would read Say Nothing because she loves it so much. She really wanted me to read it. So I promised her I would, and I haven't yet. And then recently she made an author spotlight on Jonathan Safran Foer, and I have been relentlessly nagging her to make that video for a long time because she told me she would, and I really wanted to see her do it. So since she finally came through on that, I should also probably come through on my promise to her. So I'm putting Say Nothing on my TBR for this month, and I felt like it only made sense to also include his newest book since it also comes out this month. But it's definitely not a chore to read either of these. I should make that clear. I want to read both of these because I loved Empire of Pain last year. Well, as much as you can love a book like Empire of Pain. So those are the books that I'm planning to read in June, plus of course any books that I read for my written reviews, which as usual I will hold off on talking about until those reviews are actually out there in the world and I can give you a link to where you can read them. But all the books that I mentioned in today's video will be linked in the description box below for your clicking convenience. If you have thoughts on any of these books, if you've read them, you want to read them, you want to share your thoughts with me, I'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. And if you would like to keep up with me, keep up with my reading, you don't want to wait until my next video, you want to see what I'm up to, you can find me on a variety of places around the internet, including Goodreads and Instagram, the two places where I'm the most active. The links to everywhere you can find me will be at the bottom of the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.